When you had that third failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up. I mean, I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.
It turned out that the third failure was caused by a 2-second glitch in the timing. 8 weeks later, Musk bet the company on another flight.
We have liftoff.
And this time around, everything worked.
Perfect.
If that fourth launch hadn't worked, that would have been it. We would have not had the resources to mount a fifth.
You couldn't have gone out at that point.
Yes, death would have been, I think, inevitable because we did not have the resources to mount a fifth launch.
This is a tricky business.
Tricky. Yeah, I wish it wasn't so hard.
You're CEO of 2 companies, you're chairman of Solar City. Talk about time management. How on earth do you do this?
Well,
Do you get any sleep?
yeah, sometimes not enough. Sleep is really great, because I find if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm quite grumpy. I mean, obviously, I think most people are that way. And also, like I try to sort of figure out what's the right amount of sleep, because I found I could drop below a certain threshold of sleep, and although I'd be awake more hours and I could sustain it, I would get less done because my mental acuity would be affected. So I found generally the right number for me is around 6 to 6.5 hours on average per night.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And any other tips
That is
on
an average, though.
Right. Any other tips on just managing to run 2 companies simultaneously? I mean, do you find? I mean, I know you're up here Monday, Tuesday. Is it all Tesla when you're up in Silicon Valley, and all SpaceX Wednesday, Thursday?
Having a having a smartphone is incredibly helpful because that means you can do email during interstitial periods. Like if you're in a car, you're walking in the bathroom, everywhere. You can do email practically when you're awake, and so that's really helpful to have email for SpaceX and Tesla integrated on my phone, and then then it's just you have to apply a lot of hours to actually working. So the way I generally do it is I'll be working at SpaceX on Monday, and then Monday night flight to the Bay Area, spend Tuesday and Wednesday in the Bay Area, then at Tesla, and then fly back on Wednesday night, spend Thursday and Friday at SpaceX. In the last several months, then I would fly back here on a Saturday and either spend Saturday and Sunday at Tesla or spend Saturday at Tesla and Sunday at SpaceX.
You are unusually fearless and willing to go in the face of other people telling you something is crazy. And I know a lot of pretty crazy people, you still stand out. Where does that come from, or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
So speaking of important things,
like people shouldn't think people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like there'd have to be something mentally wrong if you didn't feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway?
Yeah, actually something that can be helpful is fatalism to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. When starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%. And I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress. If we could just move the ball forward, even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving it forward, so that would still do some good. Yeah, same with Tesla. I thought the odds of a car company succeeding were extremely low. My brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like, I mean, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
One does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. And try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. Because you're not adding enough value.
If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company.
I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment, because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that
Right.
doesn't actually have merit. And that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week.
Gosh,
And
it's a
then
lot of work.
all those things improve the odds of success.
Okay.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve.
So one of the, I think, most common questions I hear young people, ambitious young people ask is, I want to be the next Elon Musk. How do I do that? Obviously, the next Elon Musk will work on very different things than you did, but what have you done or what did you do when you were younger that you think sort of set you up to have a big impact?
Well, I think first of all, I should say that I did not expect to be involved in all these things. So the 5 things that I thought about at the time in college, so quite a long time ago, 25 years ago, making life multiplanetary, accelerating the transition to sustainable energy, the internet, broadly speaking, and then genetics and AI. I think I didn't expect to be involved in all of those things. I actually, at the time in college, I sort of thought helping with electrification of cars was how I would start out, and that's actually what I worked on as an intern, was advanced ultracapacitors to see if they would be a breakthrough relative to batteries for energy storage in cars. And then when I came out to go to Stanford, that's what I was going to be doing my grad studies on, was working on advanced energy storage technologies for electric cars. And then I put that on hold to start an internet company in '95 because there does seem to be like a time for particular technologies when they're at a steep point in the inflection curve, and I didn't want to, do a PhD at Stanford and watch it all happen, and I wasn't entirely certain that the technology I'd be working on would actually succeed. Like you can get a doctorate on many things that ultimately do not have a practical bearing on the world. And I wanted to, I really was just trying to be useful. That's the optimization. It's like, what can I do that would actually be useful?
Do you think people that want to be useful today should get PhDs?
Mostly not.
So what is the best way to be useful?
Some yes, but mostly not.
How should someone figure out how they can be most useful?
Whatever this thing is that you're trying to create, what would be the utility delta compared to the current state of the art times how many people it would affect? So that's why I think having something that makes a big difference but affects a sort of small to moderate number of people is great, as is something that makes even a small difference but affects a vast number of people. Like the area under the curve. Yeah, exactly. The area under the curve would actually be roughly similar for those two things. So it's actually really about just trying to be useful and matter.
And then when you're trying to estimate probability of success, so you say this thing will be really useful, good area under the curve, I guess to use the example of SpaceX. When you made the go decision that you were actually going to do that, this was kind of a very crazy thing at the time.
Very crazy,
very
for sure.
Crazy.
Yeah, well, I'm not shy about saying that. But I kind of agree. I agreed with them that it was quite crazy. Crazy if the objective was to achieve the best risk-adjusted return, starting a company is insane. But that was not my objective.
Really liking what you do, whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. First of all, I really need to give some thought to like, how can I provide advice that would be most helpful? And I'm not sure I've given enough thought to that to give you the best possible answer. But I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment, because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week.
Gosh.
And then
a lot of work.
All those things improve the odds of success.
Okay.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. When you're building something new, there's going to be mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognize those mistakes, acknowledge them, and take corrective action.
Oh.
And the success of a company is very much more about how quick are you to fix the mistakes, not will you make mistakes.
Or admit the mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you see the difference between a startup that is successful and one that is not, and it's because the successful one, they both made mistakes, but the successful one recognized the mistakes, fixed them very quickly, and the unsuccessful one tries to deny that the mistakes exist.
Extremely smart people are sometimes quite arrogant because they believe in what they believe in, right? And so when they face criticism, it's less likely to admit, they can make mistakes. Was that in your case?
I learned it when I was studying physics. In physics, you're taught to always question yourself. You're taught to always assume that you're wrong, not assume that you're right, and you have to prove yourself not wrong. And so I think that physics framework is really where I learned it, and it's very effective for learning counterintuitive things that aren't obvious.
So you are very famous in saying that failure is actually an option, and if you're not failing, that means you're not innovative enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I like failure. I mean, who likes failure is terrible, but if you only do things that are certain to succeed, then you're only going to be doing very obvious things. When I interview someone to work at the companies, would be to ask them to tell me about the problems that they worked on and how they solved them. And if someone was really the person that solved it, they'll be able to answer multiple levels. They'll be able to go down to the brass tacks. And if they weren't, they'll get stuck. And then you can say, oh, this person was not really the person who solved it, because anyone who struggled hard with a problem never forgets it.
How do you spend your days now? Like, what do you allocate most of your time to?
My time is mostly split, it's split between SpaceX and Tesla, and of course I try to spend it's a part of every week at OpenAI. So I spend basically half a day at OpenAI most weeks, and then I have some OpenAI stuff that happens during the week. But other than that, it's really SpaceX and Tesla. And what do you do when you're at
SpaceX or Tesla? Like, what does your time look like there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think a lot of people think I must spend a lot of time with media or on businessy things, but actually almost all my time, like 80% of it is spent on engineering and design. So it's developing next generation product. That's 80% of it.
You probably don't remember this. A very long time ago, many, many years, you took me on a tour of SpaceX. And the most impressive thing was that you knew every detail of the rocket and every piece of engineering that went into it. And I don't think many people get that about you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think I'm kind of a business person or something, which is fine. Like, business is fine, but but really, it's it's like at SpaceX. Gwynne Shotwell is Chief Operating Officer. She kind of manages legal, finance, sales, and kind of general business activity. And then my time is almost entirely with the engineering team working on improving the Falcon 9 and the Dragon spacecraft and developing the Mars colonial architecture. And then at Tesla, it's working on the Model 3 and some in the design studio, typically half a day a week, dealing with aesthetics and look and feel things, and then most of the rest of the week is just going through engineering of the car itself, as well as engineering of the factory.
Made some money from the sale of PayPal. You decided to build a space company. Why on earth would someone do that?
Got that question a lot, that's true. People would say, did you hear the joke about the guy who made a small fortune in the space industry, and he, obviously started with a large one is the punchline. And so I tell people, well, I was trying to figure out the fastest way to turn a large fortune into a small one. And they'd look at me like, oh, is he serious?
And strangely, you were.
What happened? It was a close call. I mean, things almost didn't work out. We came very close to failure, but we managed to get through that point in 2008. The goal of SpaceX is to try to advance rocket technology, and in particular to try to crack a problem that I think is vital for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization, which is to have a rapidly and fully reusable rocket.
Would humanity become a spacefaring civilization? So that was a dream of yours in a way from a young age, or like you dreamed of Mars and beyond?
I did build rockets when I was a kid, but I didn't think I'd be involved in this. It was really more from the standpoint of what are the things that need to happen in order for the future to be an exciting and inspiring one. And I really think there's a fundamental difference if you sort of look into the future between a humanity that is a spacefaring civilization that's out there exploring the stars on multiple planets. And I think that's really exciting, and compared with one where we are forever confined to Earth.
They focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. For example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. For any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts.
With Tesla, your goal has been to make a better car. And you've done that with an electric vehicle that people covet, that has quite a cult following, that's upgradable. But you also want to achieve, and your turn of phrase is very nice, or try to achieve this platonic ideal of a car, right? To reach perfection. So what does the perfect car look like?
Well, I mean, I do use that phrase with our engineering and design team, that aspirationally we're in pursuit of the platonic ideal of the perfect car. Yeah. Who knows what that looks like actually, but you want to try to make every element of the car as flawless as possible. And there will always be, some degree of imperfection, but try to minimize that and create a car that is just delightful in every way. And I think if you do that, then the rest kind of takes care of itself. I was wondering, I'd like to get involved in space, but I just didn't think there was anything I could do as an individual. But I was curious as to when NASA would be sending a team to Mars, because that was always going to be the thing to do after the moon. I figured that there'd be some plan, and I'd just go to the website and I could read the schedule.
Then Mars occurs.
Oh yeah, it's like, okay, 2017, good, okay. But actually there wasn't anything on the website, and or at least I thought, can I not find it? What's going on here? And is it secret? I don't know. But it turned out that that NASA had done a study on what it would cost to do a manned Mars mission, and this was under Bush the First, and in his first, he asked for a 90-day study shortly after
taking office, and NASA came back with a $500 billion price tag. And he said, okay, maybe not.
Billion with a B.
That's when $500 billion was serious money for the government. So then that got totally shelved, and it was like you were not allowed to talk about any kind of crewed mission to Mars at NASA. Anyway, but I thought, well, if I can do something that would galvanize public interest, and then that public interest would translate to additional appropriations for NASA and increase their budget, then maybe they could do it. So actually, what I sort of thinking I would do is send a small greenhouse to the surface of Mars with seeds in dehydrated gel, and then upon landing, hydrate the gel and grow the plants. And the public tends to respond to precedents and superlatives. So this would be the furthest that life's ever traveled, the first life on Mars. I tried to figure out how to do this with the proceeds that I had from PayPal. And I was able to figure out how to get the cost of the spacecraft down and the communications and the little greenhouse and everything. But the one thing I couldn't compress was the cost to launch, because there are only a few options. And the US options were way too expensive. And so I ended up going to Russia 3 times to try to buy the biggest ICBM in the Russian nuclear fleet.
That's where I'd start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go big or go home. Right? Yeah.
I mean, okay. There was some strange trips, that's for sure. But it's like virtually, like you can buy any. It's a very capitalist society in some ways. So I actually did negotiate a deal to buy 2 of the ICBMs minus the nukes. But I came to the conclusion after that 3rd trip that it wouldn't really matter. Like I actually came to the conclusion that my initial premise was wrong, because I actually think there's a tremendous amount of will in the American population, particularly to explore. The United States, maybe more than any other country, is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. And it's really fundamental to psyche. So if people think there's a way, I think it would actually get a lot of support. But it can't be just banging your head against the wall. I've got to believe that this can be done without breaking the federal budget. So that's when I said, okay, well, is there some way to affect the cost of space transport? And so I got together with a group of people over a series of Saturdays just to try to understand, is there something fundamentally super expensive about rockets, or can the cost be substantially improved? We had a bunch of those kind of brainstorming sessions, and I couldn't see any fundamental obstacle to improving the cost of rockets. So that's when I started SpaceX.
It's like, I'll just build them myself.
Yeah.
And then.
But like I said, at that point, I would say the probability of success was definitely less than 50%. I thought it would most likely not succeed, but it was worth a try.
Now is the time to take risk. You don't have kids. As you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that. Before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
CEO of SpaceX, and you've said that your ultimate goal is to get humankind to Mars. I've heard your response to the question, but these guys need to hear it. Why is Mars important? Why does Mars matter?
Sure. Well, I think it's really a fundamental decision we need to make as a civilization. What kind of future do we want? Do we want a future where we are forever confined to one planet until some eventual extinction event, however far in the future that might occur? Or do we want to become a multi-planet species and then ultimately be out there among the stars and be among many planets, many star systems? And I think the latter is a far more exciting and inspiring future than the former. And Mars is the next natural step. In fact, it's the only planet we really have a shot at establishing a self-sustaining city on. And I think once we do establish such a city, there will be a strong forcing function for the improvement of spaceflight technology that will then enable us to establish colonies elsewhere in the solar system and ultimately extend beyond our solar system.
And so there's the defensive reason of protecting the future of humanity, ensuring that the light of consciousness is not extinguished should some calamity befall Earth. But also, and that's the defensive reason. But personally, I find what gets me more excited is the fact that this would be an incredible adventure. I mean, it'd be like the greatest adventure ever. And it would be exciting and inspiring. And there need to be things that excite and inspire people.
Yeah.
You have to be, reasons why you get up in the morning. It can't just be solving problems. It's got to be, something great's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, we talked about this at length yesterday. It's not an exit strategy or a backup plan for humankind when Earth fails.
Right.
It's also to inspire people on Earth, right, and to transcend and to go beyond our mental limits of what we think we can achieve.
Right. I mean, you think of sort of how incredible the Apollo program was, and just, I mean, if you ask anyone and say, name some of humanity's greatest achievements of the 20th century, the Apollo program, landing on the moon, would in many, if not most cases, be number one. I would definitely advise people who are starting a company to expect a long period of quite high difficulty.
Yeah.
But I mean, as long as people stay super focused on creating the absolute best product or service that really delights their end customer, like if they stay focused on that, then if you get it such that your customers want you to succeed, then you probably will.
All right. You have to focus on the customer and delivering for them.
Yeah. Make sure if your customers love you, your odds of success are dramatically higher.
Yeah.